From here in North Alabama to Virginia, outrage against police brutality brought renewed attention to the issue of these Confederate monuments. Statues that have stood for centuries came toppling down, some by the hands of protesters themselves. Fox News correspondent Ashley Strohmeyer explains what some activists hope to see replace these monuments.
Protests against racial injustice reignited the debate over Confederate symbols. After being the subject of controversy for decades, monuments and other public statues across the country were removed. Now one big question looms: who and what should take their place? Many sculptors like Dana King hope communities will honor often forgotten black leaders while also supporting black artists.
So much of the work that has been created on our behalf, if you will, has been done by white sculptors. That's a problem.
King is working to improve this representation by memorializing figures like Black Panther Party co-founder Huey P. Newton. But she says she does not want her work placed on the empty plinths that once propped up symbols of oppression.
Those plinths are poison. I think they should all be torn down after a time. But in the meantime, we should sit around them and we should talk.
Historians say honoring black lives with sculptures is only a first step in the nation's reckoning with racism.
That has to happen in sync with efforts to broaden black representation in other aspects, right? And so not simply statues and monuments, but also making sure that there are black elected officials.
Nationwide, about 50 Confederate monuments have been removed since 2015. Nearly 800 still stand. Ashley Strohmeyer, Fox News.